so go ahead and open one of the documents that you know you're going to want to use as your background for your composite or your surrealism picture. So I just downloaded a variety of pictures from the zoo and from the library. So I might just want to, click on the space bar to see a picture of it. That one's the texture. This one's the butterfly wings. So I'm going to use components from each of these, but I definitely want one as the background. Maybe I'll use this, these flowers as a background. Let's see, where's the dandelion? Somewhere around here. So I'm kind of showing you an overview. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to use this as my background image. So I'm just going to open it. Now, if you have, or if you're 18, I think is the cutoff, you can use generative expand. So if you go to, well, first of all, I'd like to always make a copy of my background layer. So drag it down to the plus sign in the layers panel, or you can go up to the little 3 lines, the menu, and go to duplicate layer. There's always 2 or 3 ways to do anything in Photoshop. Let's see, Jamon, would you mind closing the door so that lunch isn't interrupting? Okay, so I might want some more room above this dandelion. I might want it to be like a vertical picture so that I can fit my model on here. So I'm going to use my crop tool, and I have it set to generative expand. You can try this and see if it works for you. And then it's going to make up what it thinks should be there with using AI. So this is not necessarily my work, my picture taking ability, but every time I hit generate, it'll create something different. So it is unique to you. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit enter and see what it does, and just hit generate without typing anything there. If I type something there, it would try to place it and blend it together, but I'm just going to generate and see what it does. You might be stuck with the composition that it's at, though. And then it usually will give you a tip while it's generating. And then when it's done, I'm ready to place my figure on my background. So this is like my background layer. Oh, it even created a second little dandelion kind of out of focus behind the first one. Do we like that, or do we want to cover it? I think it's a little weird. So I'm going to go ahead. Well, and you can see other options. If you scroll down, here's another version. So it generated no puff there, but with a couple leaves in the background, and it generated this one. Put a really big stem in the way. I think the easiest one to get rid of would probably be this stem right here. So I'm going to go ahead and just combine these 2 layers. So merge layers. And then I will select this. I'm going to do some corrective work right now because I don't like that stem just leading to nothing. And then I'll just go to edit. And this you can do without having, permissions or being 18 or whatever. You can fill with content aware. So everybody's able to do that. And that's also using AI to intelligently guess what should be there based on what's around it. Okay, so there, it got rid of that awkward stem in the background, so now I can place my figure on this little dandelion puff. Now, I did kind of like when it was like more zoomed in, because it just had more detail, so I don't know, I might crop in later, but let's see. I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, and this will allow me to choose a second photo to put in to this document as like a new layer. So I can add as many layers as I want. Whatever layer is on top is going to be like above the others and kind of overlapping. So I got to find that picture of Sabrina right here. And then I might want to make her smaller so she fits on this little dandelion like she's weightless. There we go. Okay. So what's wrong with this picture, the way it is? Why does it not look very convincing? Okay, so I can make it smaller. What else?
It's covering the dandelion.
Yeah, it has like the library behind her. We don't want that. We just want to make her look like she's standing on the dandelion. So we have to use our selection tools. I'm going to start with the object selection tool just because it usually does a pretty good job. So it's hidden underneath the quick selection tool, which if you remember what that tool does, it will just allow you to paint a selection, kind of like using a paintbrush. You want to make sure add to selection is turned on, and then you can just kind of drag around and get where she is pretty intelligently. If you hold down option, it'll subtract from the selection in case you get too much. And then if that's not working, Command D for deselect, we can try that object select tool. Whoops. Okay, so then if you just drag around whatever your object is, you might be using the alligator, maybe you're using the giraffes, so pick a picture that you want to use. And that did a pretty good job. See, it found her legs, it found even this little negative space, was left out in between her arms. So it did a pretty good job of deciding what was the part that we want. It didn't get her jacket in there, so I can now switch to my quick selection tool and just add that to my selection. Okay, so that looks pretty good. You might want to check your selection, so look up here if you don't know how to do this, so you can see the preview of what you have selected before you copy and paste it with using this selected mask up here on the options bar. So click selected mask, and I always like to view it on overlay just so I can see it on red. And it did a pretty good job. So it just kind of shows me a preview of what that's going to look like. It looks like her hair looks pretty good. So I'm just going to click OK. I don't have to modify. If I did have to change anything, like say I wanted to, I don't know, like this hair down here, if I wanted it a little bit more exact, I could turn on this smart radius. And then using this one, the refine edge brush tool, I could just click on that edge and it would find a little bit more of her hair. So it kind of refines that edge according to hair. Okay, so it kind of left some parts out, so I might even, whoops, we'll just say that's okay. So now I like to add a mask to hide the background so that it's non-destructive, because right now if I copy and pasted her onto her own layer, it's not going to keep any of what's outside the marching ants. The marching ants, that area is going to be a permanent change. So I don't like to do things that are permanent in Photoshop. I like to do things non-destructively. So look up here for a second. Adding masking is a really important skill to have. So it's right down here. And knowing when to use masks is important. At the bottom of your layers panel, if you just click the mask button, it's this rectangle with the circle in the middle, it's going to hide everything that's outside those marching ants. So make a selection on whatever photo you have and see if it works when you use the mask tool. So you click mask, it's going to hide the background. Now notice how it didn't do a great job on her hair when I was using that refine brush tool because the hair kind of matched the background. So I can now edit that mask. That's what I mean by it being non-destructive. I could use the brush tool, and if I paint with white, it will reveal. If I paint with black, it'll hide. So right now, let's see what's going on. So the opacity is turned all the way down. So see how I can like hide? I don't want that. I want the opposite. So I'm going to turn to white, and now it'll reveal. So I can reveal her hair a little bit better. And then if I want to hide, so turn it back to black to hide, I'm just going to get rid of that part. But again, I'm just adding or subtracting from the mask. I'm not actually changing the pixels in that layer. I'm just hiding them for future use maybe. Okay, that looks pretty good. So there's our little Sabrina, our little person on our dandelion. Now, it doesn't really look very realistic the way her feet are sitting on the dandelion, so I might have to change that a little bit. So maybe I make like her feet a little bit more invisible. I'm just getting nitpicky now. So right bracket key makes your brush bigger, left bracket key makes it smaller. Of course, you can also change it up here. Okay, so let's see about And if you wanted to change the brush tip, you could and make it like a little bit more like a paintbrush, but I'm just going to lower the opacity. So each time I brush, it's a little bit less. I'm just kind of covering some of her feet. So it looks like she's actually standing on a dandelion because it's kind of see-through. I don't know, maybe something like that. A little bit more convincing. Okay, now I got to put some butterfly wings on. And if I wanted to put a separate background up here, so right now she's like on top. She's on her own layer, so I might even label that layer fairy or whatever. I'm going to put some wings on her so she'll look like a fairy. I wanted to show you how to do a blending mask. That's if you want one half of your image to be one picture and then it to fade down to the lower part. So I might put like a picture of a night sky or something up here. I think one of the files that I have, file place embedded, is just that tree bark texture. Let's see if I could use that. Okay, just for the sake of this demo. Anything else? No, I think that'll work. Okay. So this one right now is on top of Sabrina. So I'm going to have to drag her up in the layers. So notice how now she's on top. But this is kind of like not very convincing the way it's like just ending abruptly. So we can add a mask, just a plain mask onto this layer. And then I can use my gradient tool to make it fade. So this is if you want maybe like daylight to be fading to night or something like that. You could have a picture of the night sky and then you just click and drag, and I'm adding like a blend. Do you see on the mask it goes from black to white? So it's going from hidden to revealed because black hides, white reveals. So there it is. I can like adjust it however I want. Okay. And I may or may not keep that. It's kind of distracting, but I just wanted to show you how a blending mask works. Okay, so for now I'm just going to hide that. Maybe I'll use it in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to add some wings on here. It's kind of the same process. File, place embedded. So I'm adding another layer here. And I got to find those butterfly wings somewhere. There it is. Okay, so I think I want to use these in the middle, these orange ones. And it might help if I lower the opacity a little bit on this layer so you can see when it's about the right size. And I might rotate. There we go. Maybe make them much bigger, maybe flip horizontal, transform, flip horizontal. Make them bigger. Maybe I'll use these red ones. Here we go. And they're kind of obscured from view with some trees, so maybe I keep the tree in there. It could be really big. All right, something like that. Now you can see there's kind of an overlay going on. So if I turned that all the way up, the opacity back to 100, you wouldn't be able to see her at all. Now I'm just going to select the butterfly wings and hide the rest. So let's see how that object select tool does. With saying I want these wings right here. Let's see if it'll find it. Okay, it did a pretty good job. It found some extra trees, some extra leaves, whatever this part is up here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a mask and then erase some of these parts here. So I'm going to grab my brush tool to erase with by just adding to the mask. Oh, and the opacity is turned way down, so if I turn that up, then it'll affect it faster. There it is. So get rid of some of this grass stuff that's covering it. And then I would just drag her to the top. Oops, can't see. So make sure you're on the right layer, painting on the right thing. And then maybe I will add that tree in here. So I'm just going to reveal this tree and say that kind of explains why it's covering her. It's kind of like daylight. I don't know. I'm just kind of playing with it. All right. So far so good. It does look very surreal. Now if you wanted to add an overlay over this of like texture, let's see what I have. File, place embedded. So you see I'm just kind of building. Just kind of like stacking my layers one on top of the other. I'm just trying to match my vision that I have in my head. And I'm going to come around in just a second and see what you guys have. So, okay, we don't need any library books. Maybe we could use an owl. I wanted to put this like headdress on her, but that would be like a finishing touch. Well, yeah, let's add this now because it'll kind of cover whatever this weird thing is behind her. Okay, so let's see what this does. Did it select it? Yeah, pretty much did. Okay, let's just hit the mask button, see what it does. Command T, make it smaller. So she's got like a little crown. That'll make it look very surreal. And then maybe using that mask, I can get rid of, whoops. What just happened? Oh, I was revealing. Let's hide. There we go. That looks like it's behind her hair or something. Now, if you want to add an outer glow, those are layer styles. So we can go down to where it says FX, and I might apply this mask. So if I delete it, whoops, Nancy. Let's see if it works. So if you go to FX, you can add some layer styles like an outer glow. And it's doing something weird because of where I masked it out. But I was thinking maybe more like a golden outer glow. That's not going to work because of where I use the mask button. That's okay. All right, so she just has a non-glowing crown halo. And then we can do a texture over the top. So let me find another texture. Oops. Sorry. That's not what I was looking for. Photo 2. Okay, so under the surrealism assignment, you can find the folder of textures that I shared with you from my Google Drive. And again, there's hundreds of these, so you can just kind of play with them. This is just for the tutorials, though. Don't use these in your actual project, unless you change them up to 70%. So which texture would look good over the top? We have sort of like this fabric-y texture. Here's some water droplets, which might look interesting. Here's just sort of this kind of artistic look with like abstract painting. Let's add this one. We'll do both. Okay, so we'll add this, and this just gives it an extra little artistic feel. Ooh, this one's wood grain. That would be cool. Okay, just to make it look a little more unique to you and maybe a little bit less harsh. So like with the butterfly wings, if I wanted to change the color on that, I might want to select just the wings though, because I don't want the greens to be purple or something. I did a pretty good job before of selecting the wings. Okay. Then hold Option to subtract from your selection. Okay, Command CV. Okay, so on these wings, if you wanted to change the color, you would just go to Window, Adjustments, and then maybe choose Hue Saturation and change the color. Now notice it's changing the color of everything. So you could just use this little Clip To button to clip it to a layer just beneath it. And it's just gonna affect those wings now. So maybe we wanna make them a little bit more yellow or green or blue. Ooh, I kinda like them teal, but then it's doing weird things to the leaves. Okay, so I'll have to decide how I feel about that. Let's just hide on this layer. So I'm gonna paint with black. I'm gonna hide this on this mask. I'm just gonna get that green back. Ooh, it's kind of cool looking. Okay, something like that. Let's just keep going. File, place embedded. And again, you can make these as complex or as simple as you want. I'm going to add this texture over the top of it. So you might take your own textures that you find around. Maybe you take pictures at, of wallpaper or floor tiles or stonework. There's all kinds of places to find interesting textures. Okay, so now I can either lower the opacity to make something more see-through, or I can change where it says normal, I can change that to something else. These are the blending modes. So if I click on it, I can go down to darken. These will darken where they overlap. This next category lightens where they overlap. This one creates contrast. Whoops, didn't scroll down all the way. And then this one creates the opposite colors where they overlap. Does some interesting things at the bottom too. Okay, so for this one, it doesn't really do a whole lot. Darken kind of looks cool. And then I can always lower the opacity from there if I don't want it to be as obvious. Okay, and then let's add that other texture. So File, Place Embedded. Yeah, the wood grain. Let's see what that does. And then just make it big enough. It almost looks like fabric, kind of cascading down. Now this one will look cool. Okay, so darken, lighten. Kind of has a warm glow. And I can also add a mask to this and erase parts of it too if it's not working right. I can put her on top. Maybe lighten and then lower the opacity this way. Okay, so it's just kind of tinting it, giving it more of like a warm feel. So I do kind of like it better with both of those. All right. Let's see. What else could I do? Any other ideas? Let's see what photos I haven't used yet. That one might be a little distracting. I have the owl. I could put the owl in there. It's a good size for an owl. All right, I like this object selection tool. It's kind of my go-to now. Oh yeah, we were gonna add some motion blur. All right, so add a mask to this layer. Now we have this nice owl. Off to the side, maybe we can make it look like it's zooming or something. So I'm gonna go up to my filter menu, and you can choose all kinds of like artistic filters. So under the filter gallery, oops, it would help if I had my layer selected. Let's rasterize this. So if it's Has this little icon in the bottom corner that means it's a smart object and you can't change the pixels, so you might have to rasterize it before you can do several things to it. So I'm going to go to filter, filter gallery. I could make this owl look like, oh, if I could zoom out. It's down here at the bottom. Okay, so you can change it to all different mediums. So it'll look like you made it with a paintbrush. There's brush strokes that you could play with. It's just a little slow. Ooh, that one's creepy. I kind of liked the dry brush. Okay. So it looks painted. And then to add motion effects, you can go up to filter and then go down to blur, motion blur. So you can change the angle of the motion blur and the distance. So it looks like it's moving. I think it's affected by the mask too. So if I apply the layer mask, now I add the motion blur filter, blur, motion blur. Now you can just see more of the motion blur there. So that would be one way to make something look surreal, is if there's kind of some surreal looking blur in it. Okay, and then you can kind of keep piecing it together. It should be an impossible reality, something that you couldn't find in the real world and photograph. You have to construct it with tools like Photoshop. All right, any questions? I'm gonna come around and see what you guys created. We still have about an hour working, so I would say move around the room and take some of your own source pictures if you haven't already. So I'll get out some still life objects. There's some fabric over there. If you'd like to photograph some objects on fabric, that would be an interesting way to start with a background that's kind of surreal, and then you can place your figures or people on top of that surreal background. I also have a brick wall up. There's the black fabric I'll put in front of the screen, and then there's the dappled gray one in the back if you want to use pictures of each other or create some portraits to use for your surreal picture. Maybe you need someone looking up so that there could be like a thought cloud above them that you create of what they're thinking about. Maybe you could have them, looking to either side or doing an interesting pose to use in your final composition, or one of the 5. Okay. Thank you.